The crowd goes wild. What's up, y'all? It is Zach Blobner and Brian Ritchie, the Craft Beer Playbook, episode 12.
I'm impressed you're keeping up with the numbers. I kind of lose track a little
Well, I know we're in double digits, as our friends made fun of me for, and some of our listeners made fun of me for. 12, yeah, man. No, it's rolling still. We got some good beer today from St. Petersburg. We're traveled there.
Crossing the bridge this week.
Beer-wise,
yeah.
With three daughters who, we talk about, I think, a lot how Cigar City's like the most known Tampa brewery. When I used to think St. Pete and beer, like this is the first place that would pop into my head. Three daughters. You talk about the Rays and going to the Trop and checking out different baseball games and like trying to get a craft beer. Now, St. Pete, if you go to our page, thecraftbeerplaybook.com, and you just kind of look where breweries are located centrally, there is a lot in St. Pete. Like, not that there isn't a lot in Tampa and Bradenton, Clearwater, but like if you go just downtown St. Pete, you could hit up probably the most in the smallest span. Yeah, in terms of location,
packed in there together now too. So yeah, you go out there for a nice beach day, you could hit up 3 or 4 breweries in the same little strip there. So
man,
I'm pumped for this. 3 daughters is like my situation. I got 3 female dogs, so there's 3 female daughters. So I'm excited to jump into this. I've actually tried this one for the first time this weekend, the Rod Bender Red Ale.
Rod Bender.
But I'll let you pick.
Let's start what you know with. I like the Rod Bender.
Start with what you know.
Yeah,
Go with what
red
you
ale.
know.
It looks like a big mouth bass.
So some kind of red
or
a redfish because it's a red
yeah, ale. But I just I saw who knows, dude. So I'll let you get into that. We're going to talk a lot about March Madness today. Obviously, as they're into the Sweet 16 now. Brian and I able to enjoy
sour 16 for us.
The salty Sweet 16, the salty lack of Sweet 16. But nonetheless, it's been a fun tournament so far, and we were fortunate enough on Friday to watch the first round with some of our good friends and fellow Gators as we kind of went wire to wire with the first game, which was Florida over Virginia Tech all the way to the end. And now clearly we've been through 2 rounds, not just that opener. And it's been a lot of fun, and we're going to certainly jump into the brackets, what ours look like, where we hit, where we missed. If the tournament Sweet 16 teams that are in are good or bad in terms of viewership goes. But I want to remind everybody again, you can follow us at the Craft Beer Playbook on both Facebook and Instagram, at Beer Playbook on Twitter. And I just alluded to the fact that you can check out now at thecraftbeerplaybook.com. We have kind of a page now that takes you to different breweries in different areas. So go check that out. If we're missing one, my main thing is let us know. There's a lot of breweries. It's a work in progress. But I want to say there's like 30 to 40 breweries up there on the page. So if you're just looking for a new one, or maybe you're just kind of trying to see where different ones are, what area they're in, we drink a lot of them, but you can actually see location wise kind of where they line up if you're making a trip to St. Pete or Brandon or Clearwater or Bradenton or even Sarasota. So we got a lot going on the website, again, thecraftbeerplaybook.com. And a reminder, if the video version on YouTube is something that you're driving, maybe you can also find us on wherever you get your podcast now, from maybe everywhere from Google Play, Apple Play, iHeart, just everywhere, Spotify. There's just so many different ways to get us, and we appreciate everybody who does, and we continue to get this rolling. We got some big things in the works, and we're going to continue to grow this brand.
And I'm excited for this to kind of keep growing too. I mean, obviously we set out to do this starting around the Tampa Bay area, and kind of spread out to Florida. I mean, Florida, we've talked about, even with Devin, we did our first on-site there, how many breweries now in the state of Florida has like tripled or quadrupled in the last couple of years. I'm excited for that. My parents were actually just up visiting my sister up in Tennessee, and went to a brewery called King's Bluff.
Oh, cool, man.
Up in Clarksville, Tennessee, and brought us back some beer. So we're going to be trying to hook that up possibly next week. We're going to try to do that with the owner there, Dustin. So this will be our first sort of out-of-state, review out of Florida, and I'm excited for that. Try something different and kind of keep spreading it out.
Yeah, and then ironically, we'll both be out of town next weekend. I'm actually going to Chicago for a few days with my fiance. She's going to do a little dress shopping, and it's her 30th. Shout out Ariel, and then we'll meet up with you guys and link up in Nashville, where a good friend of ours and a good friend of the show, good listener, Trevor, is getting married to Angela. So we're excited to be a part of that wedding. Yep. And then we'll find our way back to Tampa Bay. And I'm sure we'll be in a new brewery sooner rather than later.
Oh, yeah.
Locally. But
so let's dive in here.
Let's give it a
cheers. This is the Rod Bender.
Let's get a bend my rod.
That's what I was worried about the first time.
Oh, it did. I felt it.
See, so now this one.
Oh, this is good. See, I know you're like, I think you're like a closet red ale type guy.
Closet red ale guy.
Because what's the one from Cigar City, Tocobaga? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember the first time you tried that, you lost your mind.
Yeah,
like, you
that
loved
one's good
it.
too, because it's like.
This is tasty.
That one's kind of different though, because the Tocobaga or Tocobaga, that one's more like hoppy. This one's definitely more of like a caramel kind of sweet. Taste. Yeah. Like,
well, isn't that the cool thing about red ales? It's like sometimes they can lean towards hoppy, they can lean towards a brown ale.
Yep.
You just don't know what you're gonna get. Like when you're drinking an IPA, it's like, oh, how hoppy is it? That's kind of the main thing, or how citrusy is it?
Yeah.
A brown ale, you're like, how nutty is it? How dark is it? Is it closer to a porter or
nutty
stout?
Professor 5.9. Yeah.
And red ales are they kind of go in the middle.
They got a little scale here, sweet to bitter. This one's all the way down on the sweet side.
Very nice. Well, this is tasty. Very good. We were at Three Daughters probably like a month and a half ago. Ariel and I stopped in. It's funny. One of the few times we were actually looking to eat, and they have food there at their location. So
nice.
We ended up stopping by there. It was raining too. We just want to be inside and eating. And I was like, well, how lucky for us that we're at a craft beer spot too. So we got to drink a few brews there, and they do a great job. So Three Daughters, like you said, you have 3 daughters. I have 3 dogs. National Puppy Day was not too long ago. Baloo, we met a brewery pup when we were at Bastet not too long ago. So
Baloo was cool, yeah.
Cats, dogs, kids, none of them should be drinking beer. Well, at least the kids. And, we'll drink for them. But when it comes to March and the brackets, and, we had a great time Friday, like I said, kind of drinking up and down and just watching the Gators win.
Up and down and up and side to side.
But we're in the Sweet 16 now. And I know your bracket's not in a great place. You had so we went and watched some spring training baseball on Monday as well. Mm-hmm. And we were keeping a particularly close eye on the Michigan LSU game.
Yep.
Michigan, who's playing without one of their best players in Livers, as is Villanova, they're missing one of their best guys as well. Well, both teams keep advancing. They're in the Sweet 16, and they've both got tough matchups now. I believe Nova's taking on the 1 seed Baylor or Gonzaga. They're taking on one of the 1 seeds. No, it's Baylor, because Gonzaga's like a 15-point favorite or something against Creighton. And then Michigan's taking on Florida State, who I obviously put the Noles pretty deep into my bracket.
Yeah.
As much as it hurt me to do it, I'm hoping it helps my wallet and I balance out that hatred I have for Tallahassee.
Yeah, that Michigan game helped me quite a bit. I know it was kind of me and you going back and forth here. And the problem with me going against you is we have the same championship game. So we both have Baylor.
I hedged my bets.
Yeah, exactly. And you got the lead on me right now. You've had some nice picks so far. So really my best shot at this point is the Houston Cougars. So I'm hanging on to them. We both have 3 Final Four teams left, right?
Yep.
So you lost OK State.
Yep.
I lost Texas. We still have 3 alive. So it's really going to come down to that Florida State versus Houston, I think, whoever goes deeper, to see kind of where me and you kind of shake out.
And ironically, on opposite sides of the bracket. So, I mean, really, you need Houston to win. More so, you need Florida State to lose. And
absolutely.
Honestly, I felt good about Michigan not getting to the Elite Eight, because they're missing, again, one of their best players, and LSU was going to be tough. And LSU had that game in hand for most of it, blew it up late, and then just couldn't keep up, down the stretch.
Yep.
Florida State, on the other side, I felt really good about. And I think we saw one of their worst games of the season in the first round, which they won. And then I thought they played really well in the second game.
Yep.
So I don't know if we get first round or second round FSU against Michigan, but if you get second round Noles and they're playing their A game, even with Michigan playing as hot as they are, I still like Leonard Hamilton and his squad's chances. I had this conversation a lot on radio this week with some of the different hosts and people around WDAE. I think the carnage, which there was a lot of it, most benefited a team like Gonzaga. And I said, me personally, I think Baylor as well. Your 2 top 1 seeds, overall.
Yeah.
All this carnage means less good teams that they got to fight potentially in the Sweet 16. The biggest spread is Gonzaga, by the way, over Creighton. It's double digits. I believe it's 13, 14, or 15 points.
Yeah.
So you got to think, if you're the Zags, that you're feeling even better in the Sweet 16 about your path than you did when this tournament started.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, it's always nice to see the Cinderellas in there, but then, you get into those matchups there where, they're going up against the 1 seed or the 2 seed, later in the bracket, and it kind of makes for that big spread. But you never know. I mean, I kind of like Creighton, obviously not to win, but I think that game is going to be a lot closer than I think Vegas predicts. I think Creighton can get hot shooting the ball. They've played some good teams, beat some good teams this year. But yeah, I mean, I love the carnage. I love the bloodshed. So it was a lot of fun. And especially because if I remember correctly, I think in 2019, which was the last tournament, I think there was a ton of chalk, if I remember correctly. I think like all top like 3 seeds, 1, 2, 3 in each region at least made the Sweet 16 last year, or at least most of them. And it's just nice to see this year and kind of have that difference of like, you got Loyola in there. You got UCLA. Yeah. Obviously, they're not really a traditional Cinderella.
Well, that's the thing. UCLA and Syracuse are quote-unquote seed Cinderellas, but they're not program Cinderellas. Like, you know, both those cats and their coaches in their well, not their coaches over at UCLA as much with the guy they have there now, but they're the usual suspects. Their seeding is different. They're lower.
Yep. But Oral Roberts is obviously the big. They're the big Cinderella, and they got Arkansas. I don't know, man. I feel like Oral Roberts is their luck's going to run out here after a while. I mean, they're a great free throw shooting team, but Arkansas is balanced, man. They got a good defense and a good offense, so I don't really see a lot of, you know, mental lapses or cold spells drying that team up on any long stretch in that game. So I think Arkansas is just going to be too much, and they're going to outlast Oral Roberts.
So I want to go to another one. I know you still got a little bit left, and then I want to ask you about Loyola, Chicago, because I think – in terms of Cinderellas, like they're what Gonzaga used to be, or they feel like that at least, where it's like a team that, you know, you used to be like just a cute pick, right? Like I think they're a legitimate team now though. And I think that they were severely underseeded at 8, you know, they bounced Illinois, but they looked like head and shoulders above the Fighting Illini, who were arguably the best team heading into the tournament with a conference win themselves. So yeah, for me, I look at a team like Loyola Chicago and I'm like, and they're a 6.5 point favorite, I believe, in their matchup. I'm taking them to cover that. I think they're a legit contender.
Yeah.
Especially again because they, you know, you go through the 1 seed in your side of the bracket, people are gonna start to look at you and be like, this team might make some noise more than just like a blip on a radar. Like they could be contenders.
Yeah, I like that comparison you said as far as like it's sort of like kind of being that beginning stages of Gonzaga, because Gonzaga obviously was, you know, way tucked out there in where they're at. They're in Washington, I think, right?
Gonzaga?
Yeah, I think they're in the state of Washington.
They're in Gonzaga, Illinois. I don't know, somewhere.
Winchesterton, Fieldville, Iowa.
Yeah, they got some like weird name.
No, but
the Zags and Mark
you know, when Loyola went on that run, you know, to the Final Four.
2018.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, though, is like people were acting like it was so long ago. We missed a year of the tournament. So really it was 2 seasons ago in terms of March.
There's still some guys on that team that were on that team.
Well, the big guy with the weird mustache that looks like our friend Ben, he was a freshman center and he started on that team. And he was the one, honestly, dominating a lot of Illinois. And Illinois had one of the biggest players in the country in Cockburn. Which, by the way, look, the guy's name is spelled Cockburn. It's pronounced Coburn. I've never seen a name where the C and the K in the middle of the name are just silent. So, like, I'm convinced. You get to
make up your own pronunciation, bro. When you
that's insane. And look, he's a big dude. Like,
should we call you Blobner?
There was
Blobner.
You can't just make up names. And that was like one of the things watching that game. I'm like, are they saying Coburn because they don't want to say Cockburn? Because like it's just an awkward like thing to say on national TV. But apparently, like they've been calling him that all season. So it was odd to me. I'm not buying that. You know, his name's Cockburn. Like I don't own it, dude. Look again, last name Blobner. Like I learned early in life. Like yeah, it's gonna get weird and sometimes.
Definitely is weird.
You have to own it.
No one ever believes that that's your real name.
Again, that's why you got to own it. Like. My fiance makes fun of me all the time because when I'm closing tabs out at bars, I'm like Blobner, and a lot of bartenders are like, "Oh, can you say that again? Or can you spell that?" So I always say Blobner, B-L-O-B as in blob. I was a fat kid. Thanks for bringing it up. And it's like I own it though. Like it's a joke I say all the time, but like obviously if you're just meeting me for the first time and I say that and you're a bartender, you're like, "Oh, that's funny." Well, if you're Cockburn, like own it. Like Cockburn, not as bad as it sounds. See you on the court. Like
I read before that last names were originally created based off of a profession. So in your lineage, what were the
I don't know what the Blobners were doing, but I can tell you what the Cockburns were doing. So, I mean, we're, you know.
But you
yeah, speaking of last names, Richie, that's clearly not.
I don't know. That didn't
work out. Like,
that didn't funnel down.
You sure they didn't do the opposite?
That didn't funnel down the lineage there. But no, I mean, I think now, like being in radio and obviously building a brand, I think you're probably glad you have a unique, last name.
So let's open this and I'll tell you a fun story of how I almost picked a different radio name. I don't know if you've actually ever heard this story.
I definitely have not.
At UF, literally, there was a time in my senior year, and we were working on a big story.
I need a beer for this. So
it's a good story,
all right.
And it's UF related. The Gators are out of the tournament. Bimini Twist IPA. Now Bimini
Bobbity Boop.
No, Bimini is Bahamas.
Yeah.
You remember we used to work with a guy at Outback Steakhouse. Me and Brian were in hospitality a long time. Mike Fountain, obviously you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had one of these with him one time, and he used to talk about Bimini because he's a Bahamas guy. Bohemian.
You had this beer?
I don't know if we drank it like together, but the word Bimini, like we talked about it. It's Bohemian. It's from the Bahamas. So I do recall that. And these are cool. I don't think we read the back of this one. So like these have little snippets, Three Daughters Brewing, and you can check them out at 3dbrewing.com. But like this one says, don't let this one get away. A slight hint of citrus from the hops makes this Indian Pale Ale as refreshing as a Bimini sea breeze.
What was the last word?
Refreshing as a Bimini sea breeze. And I'm sure that's like
I'm ready to be refreshed.
So, well, you can wait.
He's pouring himself first.
Sorry.
So I want to hear the.
When we talk about
story.
Cockburn for 5 minutes, we need something stronger. We might have to switch to whiskey. So Bimini Twist. I've had this before. It's been a minute though. Like I know I like it, and we're getting to. By the way, we haven't drank this one yet.
What kind of beer is it again?
It's a refreshing IPA. It says. I didn't know if it was a double.
Refreshing IPA.
Well, I didn't know if it was a double
category.
It's a Bimini Twist. It's IPA, so it's a little hoppy. Cheers. Oh, it's. Man, similar. So we just talked about how like the red ale, it like favors the non-hoppy side.
Yeah.
I would say that this is an IPA that does the same. Like it doesn't really favor.
What's the percentage?
Let's get a little bit of caramel on that too, man. It's like it got this like very interesting 7%. Taste. Now we still have a Florida Orange IPA. I'm sure that won't taste anything like this. And then the Bleach Blonde Ale, which is one of my go-tos when I'm like at the beach or at the pool or something.
Yeah.
You usually find those. That's an easy one for me to order. All right, so before we move on to NFL free agency and get into some of these other beers, it's good though. It's tasty. If I ordered this not knowing it was supposed to be an IPA, I would be happy with it. If I ordered this like, I want to try it. I love IPAs. This probably wouldn't be my go-to. I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's got the little scale again on this. So we're looking at, between the sweet and bitter, it's sitting at around 70% towards the bitter side. But
and I would say that you can taste that in it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not bad. It's just not what I would want out of an IPA personally. But, nonetheless, it's a good beer. And, if it was being poured like it is right now, I'd be drinking it.
I like it.
Again, 3 Daughters in St. Petersburg. Big fans of them over there. Not too far from the Trop. So I was at Florida. And this is when the Gators basketball team was good, not getting bounced by Oral Roberts in round 2. And I was working on this big story. And I remember I talked to one of my mentors there who was like a teacher's assistant. And we're chatting. And I'm like, man, like I've been really thinking about my radio name. Because it was really popular, like up until probably like 15 years ago, everybody had a radio name. No, like seriously, like if you were in radio, you didn't have your actual name. Like your boss would usually pick your radio name and say, we're going to go with this for branding. And it was always like something like generic, like John Smith, because it's just easily like people know it and stuff. Right. So with that being said, I remember being like, I don't know if I want to go with Zach Blobner. Like my middle name's James. And I was like, I feel like Zach James is more of a radio name.
Zach James.
It felt like more of a radio name. And look, at that time, I was like, I want to do sports, but I was like, I like country a lot too. And actually, when I got to Jacksonville and I was splitting time between the sports station and the country station, I thought about going by Zach James on the country station because I just thought it fit. I thought it fit better. So I talked to the guy for a while.
Wear a cowboy hat, smoke a pack of cigs.
Have a nice can, nice pension. Next up is Kelly Pickler.
Zach James.
So I thought about that. I really did. And I put a lot of thought into it. And I talked to this guy and I was like, I like Blobner. It's memorable. But I was like, does it fit the brand? Does it fit radio? Like, do people see that and they're like, oh, that's a radio name? The answer is no. People don't think like that's a radio name.
Yeah.
But it is super memorable. And I meet a lot of people that obviously remember the name Blobner that, if my last name was James, probably wouldn't recognize it as quickly as they do a Blobner. And you've seen, like, I'll be out paying a tab, and I'll be like, oh, it's Zach Blobner. And somebody next to us will be like, do you work at DAE? and they'll notice it. So I'm happy I ended up sticking with it, but there was a real time in my life I considered making the change, at least in the public eye, from Blobner to Zach James.
Did your mentor talk you out of it?
He didn't. Matthew Creedle was his name at UF. I think he still does some work over there. Served in the military too. Shout out to the armed forces and vets and both active duty. Big fans of both here, and obviously appreciate their support. He weighed out pros and cons. And he said, this is why this will be good with Blobner. This is why it'll be bad. Same thing with Zach James. I don't actually remember the list that well, but he gave me kind of like a really good, well-rounded explanation on like what each one would do. And ultimately, I was like, well, it's hard to stick out in this business. And I was like, if Blobner gives me the best chance to do that, and it's my real name, like here's another thing in radio. If it's the fake name, especially if it counts as branding, if it's a fake name. So there's a potential that I could have used Zach James, went to a station, been fired, and they're like, yeah, we're keeping Zach James. Isn't that crazy? They own the name. And then I would have had to go somewhere else and be Zach Blobner. And I'm like, now, similarly, they can't be like, we own Zach Blobner because that's my fucking name.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work out like that. So anyways, long story short, I went with Zach Blobner. The rest is history. And, I've had some success in radio, you could argue. And now we're having some success drinking some good beer and doing the craft beer playbook, which I'm happy about. We're episode 12, Zach Blobner, as you know, Brian Ritchie, which is his real name.
That is my real name.
That's a real name. That's a good radio name, though.
Be rich.
Well, that's not radio. That's, yeah, I got no comment.
Be rich or die trying.
See, that's more like, yeah.
My ancestors should have tried harder.
God, they should have. I don't know what my ancestors were doing. Blobbing real hard.
Yeah.
Hemoblobbing, bloobing, bleebing.
Nice.
But
like
so
that.
Back to March Madness. Another interesting conversation. We'll take a quick break here in a second. Love the tournament. Obviously, you and I enjoy that first day. We do it often. And I think there was a conversation of like, how do you rank like playoffs? And I think most people you meet are going to say March Madness head and shoulders is number one.
Yeah.
I think it's probably an argument between the NHL playoffs and NFL playoffs second. And then, wherever you want to go down the list, MLB playoffs, NBA playoffs, there's the World, I don't know if World Cup and Olympics play into that. They're kind of like playoffs. Champions League obviously has its own like seating situation. One of the ones I brought up though, and I'm like, not to stay in college, but I think college baseball for me is 2, because Omaha goes regional, super regional, and then you have like your round robin tournament, and you get some home games, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm. And then you end up in Omaha where, again, you're round robin. So even if you lose, you're in this elimination bracket. I love the way college baseball is set up.
Yep. And then you get to the championship, and then obviously you have 3
2 out of 3 again. So that I love that setup because it gives you a little bit of everything. And you can see a lot of teams. Every team has an option or an opportunity to kind of be successful. And I think it limits with super regionals because you go to the higher seed. It limits not the amount of upsets, but we're looking at it in March Madness now, how the Sweet 16 is very bottom based in terms of seeding. Well, you don't really want that from a viewer standpoint. You want a mix. You want like a Goliath and a non-Goliath. David. I don't know. I was like, couldn't think of his name. A David and a non-David, or a Goliath and a non-Goliath. No, David and Goliath. You want that matchup. That's what makes the upset so good. Seeing who's going to tune into Oral Roberts in Arkansas? Like, that's not one that people were on board with, a 3 versus whatever they were, an 11.
Well, I disagree to a certain extent. I think that, on the topic of the playoffs and ranking the playoff systems, I think, like, sometimes people get too caught up in trying to, like, make everything the same. They're like, well, how can we make the playoffs more like college basketball? How can we make the playoffs more like this?
But that's why I like baseball. It is very different. There's no other playoff
right,
like
and that's what I'm saying is, like, that adds value to it.
I said that.
Well, then I guess I'm agreeing with you on that point. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to March Madness, I mean, first of all, especially for me personally, it's been 2 years. I love March Madness probably more than anything. It's like one of my favorite times of year. I'm going to watch Oral Roberts in Arkansas because, again, there's that element of like, okay, how far can Oral Roberts go? And I think if we look at going up against a Goliath, I don't think you consider Arkansas a Goliath, right? So that kind of gives Oral Roberts that chance again. We're like, okay, just like Loyola did 3 years ago, how deep can they go? They went to the Final Four, right? As a what were they, a 14 seeder?
All right. Well, the biggest underdog seeding matchup is Loyola and Oregon State. You can't tell me that that's more intriguing than like Loyola and Oklahoma State, which would have been, if there was no upset for the Beavers in round 2. Like that's where you kind of lose me. I'm not saying that there is no interest, but you can't tell me that there's not significantly more interest in a 4 seed versus Loyola Chicago.
Well, I think to a certain extent, it doesn't always have to be like, okay, so you may not have the brand names, right? You may not have like Loyola going against Duke, but I think when you look at it from a standpoint of, okay, when you have two underdogs advance, they're closer in level, right? So now you have less of a chance, theoretically, of having that blowout game in the Sweet 16. So I think there's an argument for both. I think that, seeing that underdog go against, the Goliath has some appeal, but I think there's also some appeal seeing two Davids fight it out, right? And see which one's going to be the Cinderella story that there seems to be every year.
I mean, it's each their own, and that's the beauty of sports and craft beer, if we're being honest. But for me, like two Davids going at it doesn't do much. Two Goliaths, I'm in. A Goliath and David, I'm in. Two Davids, it's not a huge deal to me. Now, and if it's a championship game, winning a national title is big enough that it'll pull me in no matter what. But in terms of like brackets and stuff, it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Does a lot for me.
But
bends my rod.
Gives me a Bimini twist of what I want to do or not do in terms of watching. But I'll say this again. As far as carnage in the first two rounds and everything outside of the Gators losing, just from my heart standpoint, I thought it was a phenomenal opening.
Oh, so much fun.
It was so much fun.
And then we got some good games, too. I mean, we got some overtime games. We got some games that went down to the wire, even the upsets. I mean, that's the thing. I think we can agree on this. Whether we disagree on the David versus Goliath thing, I think that no matter what happens, you just want a close game. Like, you don't want to blow out. You don't want to watch a game that's, like, boring and you're like, okay, even if it's the David beating the Goliath, it's like it kind of takes away from some of that appeal. You want the nail-biter at the end. You want the Chris Chiozza shot.
We haven't had any buzzer beaters.
I know, and actually, the last few years, there have been less and less, it seems like, of the buzzer beaters. But there's still been some close games.
Like, because of all these David versus Davids. We had more David Goliaths and more buzzer beaters. I think there was one buzzer beater, and I think it was like it was the end of the first half, so it wasn't even like a pure one. It was just like an extra three for I don't even remember who it was. All right, so we're gonna take a quick commercial break. We're gonna have a couple more beers: Bleach Blonde Ale, and what's this one again? Florida Orange IPA, both from Three Daughters over in St. Petersburg. This is episode 12 of the Craft Beer Playbook. We're gonna hit on a few things in NFL free agency, and also the NHL fired a referee.
Saw that.
Fired him.
Saw that. You fired.
I want to see how you feel about makeup calls and hot mics on refs, and if it should become the norm. We'll be right back. Episode 12. Craft Beer Playbook blooper reel.
Oh, I did just watch The Prestige the other day, though.
It's a great one, too.
Yeah.
What a twist.
What a twist. Actually, okay, let me ask you this. Off the record, though. This is nothing to do with it.
So technically, everything's on the record.
Did you like the Prestige better or the other one that had a twist? Yeah, with Edward Norton, because I know that's your guy.
They're both really good. Prestige is better.
You get like Ants came out, or when like Bugs Life, and it's like, why would I go see both of those? Why would I go see two Pixar movies?
Ants was so bad. Ants wasn't Pixar though.
Ants wasn't that bad.
It sucked. Bugs Life at least had other bugs. After 10 minutes of Ants, I was like, we get it. You're Ants. Craft Beer Playbook. Back in it, back at it. This is the second half of episode 12, the Craft Beer Playbook. Zach Blobner, Brian Ritchie, doing the damn thing. Reminder that you can follow us on social media, Instagram and Facebook at the Craft Beer Playbook, and on Twitter at Beer Playbook. Also, we're on Untapped. We'd love to be your friend. Just send us a request, and we'll drink together for the most part.
We'll cheers you.
Hell yeah. The craftbeerplaybook.com, by the way, added a page. Awesome if you want to check it out. It basically just takes all these breweries and ones we even haven't had beers from yet and categorizes them by where they're at location-wise. So you can kind of get an idea if you're visiting or if you're already in town and you're in an area and you're like, oh, man, I'm in St. Pete. Like, where can I go? Pull up the craftbeerplaybook.com, and you can head to that page. Easy to find. You'll see it on the home screen, and you can kind of just figure out what's around you. And then you can kind of search from there. So it's very helpful.
You're fun and informative. That's our goal here.
I mean, look, I love drinking with you. I love talking sports with you. One of the main reasons I wanted to start this up with you, though, was to have that type of page, because really there's nothing like it on the internet. Yeah. You can look up on your maps like craft breweries around you. But in terms of like having a page you can go to, especially if you're coming from out of town and you're like, hey, I'm actually going to be in Sarasota this weekend. Like, how do I find breweries in Sarasota? There isn't like just a page for Sarasota breweries. Right. Well, now you can go to the craftbeerplaybook.com and you can find that.
Or taking over.
Well, we're just finding our spot.
Carve it out, baby. Carve it out.
Community. Brian's over here. He's just trying to take over. I want to take over this beer and drink it. Florida Orange IPA. I think this is going to be more in our wheelhouse. The other two are good.
6.9.
What is it?
6.9.
Nice. Went from Cockburn to 6.9.
62 IBUs. How many BTUs is on it?
IBU it.
Still on the wall.
So I brought up as we drink this. I'm excited because, like I said, I think it's more in our.
Smell that. Get that orange peel
right off the nose. You think this is fresh Florida oranges that they cram into this? Three Daughters Brewery over in St. Petersburg. Love them. That's who we're drinking with today. They are our brewery of focus, and happy to stay local with them. So the NHL had a referee mic'd up, and it was in one of the Nashville Predator games. And basically on his hot mic, the referee was like saying he was purposely going to call a penalty. And was like, yeah, screw those guys. Like, he used more profane language. Basically got caught on a hot mic saying he was going to call a penalty before it happened. And he manufactured a penalty against the team, which we all in sports know happens. Subconsciously or consciously, these officials have something in mind when they head into games. That's why typically, and I'll use college football as an example, typically in college football, they use officials from different conferences for like specific conference, not championship games, but the playoffs and stuff, right? Like if it's Bama and Clemson, they'll use Pac-12 refs because what dog do they have in the fight?
Yeah.
So, and as sports gambling becomes more and more legalized, you got to be more and more careful.
Yeah.
Refs have to be more transparent because there's money being moved, right? Not just on the field of play or ice or whatever. But the NHL just went ahead. Gary Bettman just went ahead and said, we're going to fire this dude. We're here for the integrity of the game. And I've, for a long time, despite having a very close friend that Charlie, who is an NHL, he's an official for hockey. He's done all kinds of different levels. Despite being close friends with him, I've always said, your officials in the hockey are the worst out of all officials. And I truly do believe that. Now, look, you can argue about the NFL, but I think they follow the rules to the best of their ability. The rules are questionable. I think the refs are just doing their job. I think in the NHL, they just do whatever the hell they want, and nobody holds them accountable. This is the first thing I can remember in hockey where a guy's been held accountable. So a couple questions. Do you think firing this guy was too far? And if it was a makeup call, if this was something that he was just doing because of something that happened earlier in the game, how do you feel about makeup calls?
Yeah, great question. I think that, and I think you'll probably agree with me on this, I think that this guy is definitely falling on the sword for NHL referees.
Literally tastes like an orange, by the way.
It smells just like an orange.
It tastes like I just bit into an orange. It's not bad. It's not super hoppy. But we talked about that.
That's good though. Yeah.
Oh yeah, IPAs, they're more citrusy or hoppy for
very, very orangey.
Oh yeah.
Like if orange juice had a baby with a beer, this is what it would taste like.
I'm just picturing that.
Don't picture it. Just drink it. Just
now I'm looking at it. Now I'm thinking about Cockburn.
Don't do that either. All right, to answer your question, I think that this guy fell on the sword. I think that obviously if he's willing to say that and it gets caught on a hot mic, then that means these conversations are normalized.
He was supposed to retire this year, by the way. This was his last year, for what it's worth. Think about being in your last year of something. How much do you give a shit?
Right.
Just for the record.
But if he's that comfortable saying that to someone else and it just happens to get caught on a hot mic, that means these conversations are happening every night on the ice.
And do we really think he's the only ref?
No, of course not. Okay. That's what I'm saying. He fell on the sword. Gary Bettman literally hacked this guy because he was like, I don't want this getting any worse than it is. Let's just pretend like he's the only problem and let's just cover it up.
First of all, how dumb does he think we are? And us knowing that he thinks
there's no way for us to know for sure though, right? He gets rid of this guy. He's making a statement to say, I'm protecting the integrity.
Well, they won't put a mic on any ref anytime soon. I'll tell you that.
What I'm saying, man. They have mics anyways. They gotta announce the calls, don't they? They all have mics.
Well, they're gonna start doing like, I don't know, calls from the booth in terms of like the vocal aspect of it.
It's just it is scary, right? And it's funny because right after that happened, I texted our friend Charlie, and his opinion was that it was getting all blown out of proportion. Now he didn't elaborate on that, so I'll have to have some follow-up questions.
He's in the fraternity of officiating.
Right. He's
looking out for his guys.
I get it, but he doesn't know that guy. Well, he might know that guy.
I don't understand like what was blown out of proportion though. Like the fact that like refs do this all the time, because I agree with that. Like I think it was blown out of proportion that this was an isolated event because it wasn't. Right. It was he just got just like anything else. He got caught.
But in the sense that this does happen on a regular basis, that's not getting blown out of proportion. That is a major problem. right?
But we all know that happens.
Right. But that's
and look, again, you could argue it happens in all sports. I think it happens more in hockey than any other sport. Makeup calls. I really do.
Oh, now, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've seen many, many instances of that in games that happening in real time. So I agree with that. I just think that it's still makeup calls is one thing, right? When you make a call and then you maybe realize afterwards, okay, that was kind of a stupid call, or that shifted the momentum.
But you're taking 2 bad calls. So you have a bad call. You're like, damn, that was a bad call. You know what I'm going to do to make up for it? Make another bad call. And what aspect of life does that make any sense in any capacity? Like, imagine you screwed your friend over. Don't screw me over. But imagine like you screwed me over and you're like, I feel bad, so I'm going to screw the friend over that I screwed you over for, like, and now you're both screwed. Like, now everybody's happy because, like, I didn't single you out. Now everybody's screwed. What a crappy, like, way to handle life. Like, no, it doesn't work.
I agree. I agree that it shouldn't happen in the first place. But I guess a makeup call to me is better because they're trying to even the playing field rather than a guy just making a call because a player talks shit to him, or like he doesn't like that guy or he doesn't like that team. Like, that becomes a major problem because, like you said, how much money is involved with not only games but also with gambling becoming more and more legalized. Yeah. That's huge, bro. You start giving these guys that kind of power to control that. And you saw the who was that NBA ref, Donahue or whatever, that went to jail literally because of all that stuff for years.
He threw Tim Duncan out of a game for laughing.
Yeah,
because he doesn't like Tim Duncan.
Right.
Like, but it's a different era now. Like, I don't think the newer officials, newer referees in sports are as colorful for the most part as the ones that we saw growing up. Just like the players too. Like, they're not as brash for the most part, I think, and hardened and just out there doing whatever they want to do. Hardened. But to that point though, and with that being said, I think you look at these different guys and what they do. I think if you're making comparisons, look at baseball. I'm a big robot ump guy. Because I think they try to take I think it's all about taking the spotlight, right? Like, that's what these guys try to do. Like, they're not the player, but they're around all these players, and they're on the ice, and they're on the TV or radio.
Sad, isn't it?
They want the spotlight. Rather than just starting...
Ref shows are the worst type of games to watch.
Just start a podcast and drink beer with your best friend if you want the spotlight. It's way easier.
I'd watch a ref podcast and just hear some behind-the-scenes stories.
We can get a referee on here.
Let's get a referee on here.
Well, we know a referee.
Yeah, well, he's
also a lawyer and does 20 other things, so I don't know.
He's very busy. We'll have to carve out 10 minutes of his time.
Sure.
I'm not sure what he charges by the hour.
He did take us to a spring training game recently, so we got to give him credit for that.
Recently? That was like 2 days ago.
Is 2 days recent?
Yeah.
All right, we're on the same page. But that's why, like, I like robot umps, and it goes back to like the betting and everything. And as we legalize more and we get further and further through things, Brian, I just think that refs are going to be taking more and more out of the game, and honestly, as they should be, as long as it's just as accurate or more accurate to have other things in place. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the strike zone is probably one of the most arbitrary things. And listen, I understand the argument for the traditionalism of certain sports and having that slight chance of, not slight, in some cases, major chance of human error. I get that, but why would you want that, right? If you can have just a more accurate game, like we're still using like these retired guys.
You don't want it in other aspects of life. If you were having your house built and you had an architect that was like, I'm going to ballpark this. I'm a little like, their strike zone's different on how they call things, right? So like their plumbing's usually a little off, but the building's going to be great. No, you're like, the plumbing's important. Like, it has to be accurate.
When you look at the NFL, bro, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We're still using retired guys with a chain instead of lasers or something better. A chain. I remember watching a Dolphins game one time. They pulled out an index card to measure the distance between the ball and the chain. An index card and chains? What are we doing here? There's billions of dollars.
You're just eyeballing it at that point.
I'm ready for a Bleach Blonde.
Bleach Blonde.
Bleach Blonde
Bro,
ale.
If you pull me Bleach Blonde ale right now.
Bleach Blonde ale. Look at that hair.
This is one of my favorites. Like I said, I get this often when I'm out somewhere. If it's like a sunny situation. Yeah, it looks like bleach the way you popped it open.
She's foamy. Three Daughters Brewery. We got 5%, so nice and light. Very light.
This is a good beer. So like to pivot back away from sports for a second. This is one of those beers that I usually offer to people that don't drink a lot of craft beer. Because I'm like, look, if you're just introducing yourself, right, you're just getting into it. And we talked to Houston from Bastet about this a few weeks ago. You want to give them something that like isn't going to blow their mind, but it's going to make them like, oh, maybe craft beer isn't as like hokey as they thought it was. And really, we're talking about mostly older people, I'll be honest. And that's fine. Like, you're just trying to evolve people's palates and grow their like variety of beers that they're drinking. And I think Bleach Blonde Ale is one of the ones I use because it's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but it's a good drink. It's steady, and you can get it different places, different bars, and all that. So I'm a big fan of the Bleach Blonde Ale.
Yeah. Bleach Blonde? Beach Blonde?
No, you got me screwed up now. You said Bleach Blonde.
It's kind of like you with beers and bears.
It's the same thing. Steady, like I said, nothing crazy.
Super
I'm sure
light.
you've had this before.
Yeah, I think I have.
Well, can we read the back? It's easy on the... That's all I can see.
It's easy on the tongue. Refreshing and bright. St. Pete Beach Blonde Ale finishes with a satisfying hint of citrus. A bombshell of a brew that brings the Florida coast to your palate.
See, this is the type of beer that Cockburn should, endorse.
24 IBUs. It's way down there on the sweet scale.
Yeah. No, it's an easy drinking brew, man. Yeah, in terms of the referee stuff, though, I hate makeup calls. I hate the fact that we use refs to make the game any of the games more entertaining. Like, I don't want more entertaining. You know what entertains me? The teams that are playing, the players, the coaches. I don't need officials. Give me robots. Give me Rosie from the Jetsons, calling texts. I don't give a shit.
Hey, I agree with you, man. I'm all for give me lasers to measure the first down. Give me literally robots to decide the strike zone. I mean, it's give me some consistency with that stuff. And I think that fans and players can probably all agree that it's going to make the game more fair. Do we really? I mean, what's the point? Why do people hang on to this idea that we need refs?
Because they're old.
What does it do for the game?
Well, I think that there are ways to use officials, right? In each game, even if they're just relaying the response of the robots in certain situations. I mean, I've seen Terminator. The humans win in the end, so we're good on that. I'm not super concerned about it. But yeah, I just want the most accurate game called. I want to watch the players. I want to watch the coaches and focus on that. I don't need the officials getting crazy too. I want to wrap things up here on the Craft Beer Playbook, episode 12, talking a little NFL, a little football for you. And again, shout out to Three Daughters for supporting us. And we drinking some great beers from them today. We're going to definitely get out there again soon. I've been out there a few times in St. Petersburg. And the NFL, one of the things we've watched pretty closely, Brian, I would say, is receivers. And since the last episode, the Dolphins brought in Will Fuller. We say Galladay's the only one that got a big deal. Juju stayed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Just kind of your take on what happened with the receivers this free agent period. Very weird, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I was a bit surprised. I mean, I expected receivers to, because there were some big names, right? I mean, you got Juju, obviously.
Godwin and Robinson got tagged at the beginning, so that obviously was going to bring the market. Well, see, I thought it would push the market up, but it brought the market down, you could argue.
Well, I think the biggest factor in bringing the market down is you look at how these teams view the draft class, and you look at, and free agency always kind of dictates where GMs and these teams place value in the draft. You look at the edge guys, they got paid.
There's no edge rushers.
Exactly, right? So you look at that.
It's a soft class in that capacity.
So it's very, very soft class this year. There's probably only two guys really that have round one edge grades for most teams, and those probably won't even come in the first half of the first round. So very interesting there to see obviously teams scramble and overpay when the draft market is of lesser talent. Wide receivers, I think you're seeing the opposite. So I think was the biggest factor in that is these teams say, okay, look, we don't want to overpay because it's such a deep wide receiver class. Again, even last year was too.
And that was what killed me is I feel like every year now we're talking about deep receiver classes.
Yeah, but that's great. It's great for the league because now you're seeing these young guys, these young studs come in. You look at even some of the round two guys last year, like a Brandon Ayuk, he had some COVID issues and stuff, but that guy was electric, second round guy. Rager, and then of course you got Justin Jefferson, being in the running for the rookie offensive of the year. That's good for the league. It's good to see these guys come in because a lot of times rookies, you saw guys like Jerry Jeudy last year, Henry Ruggs, they struggled in their rookie year to really produce well, and some of those factors obviously were outside their control. I think Denver went through a lot of QB issues, but it's good to see rookies come in and produce in an offensive league right off the bat, and I think a lot of teams are hoping they can strike gold again this year.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I was very surprised myself. I thought those contracts would be higher, and I think that just is going to make the draft that much more entertaining. I felt similarly about the running backs. I mean, but that market has been down for a while. It's almost like the receiving market's kind of caught up to the running back market in terms of realizing.
It's a passing league now.
Yeah, well, it's similar to the NBA, how it's a shooting league now. You might take a guy that's not a great player, but if he's a great shooter, well, there's more great shooters than there are great players.
Yeah.
And if you have a great player, you want to surround them with great shooters, not necessarily other great players. I just feel like there's just a lot of concepts that kind of cross over between the two. And, nothing too crazy in free agency. I think ultimately the biggest thing to me is, as it is every year, still the quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen some other guys sign. I think the Patriots spent a lot of money, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry both. Like,
who's your biggest free agency winner in your opinion? Like, it doesn't always translate to wins because we've seen a lot of teams try that, but at least on paper. I think the Jets
have spent smart money. Now, I have no idea what they're going to do with Darnold and their pick and the quarterback position. But in terms of everything else, I think they've spent smart money. I think the Patriots just flat out spent, and there's no shame in that if you have it, right? Like, if your last name's Richie and you come from this lineage of rich people, you can spend. But in terms of, like, good off seasons, I think it's got to be the Jets, in my opinion. Again, I'm higher on them, I think, maybe than some others. I think Kansas City, because we thought they were going to be screwed with their offensive line and have bulked it back up, potentially could be better at offensive line, or at least more consistent in terms of injuries. And then the Bucs, you got to put them in there. They're the Super Bowl champs.
Yeah.
They've lost 2 players in free agency, and they have 2 left that are on the table. That's it. The 2 they lost, Andrew Adams, who was a depth DB at safety, and Joe Haig, who the Dolphins know and the Bucs know is not a very good player.
It doesn't ring a bell, so
he's not good. And well, Pittsburgh signed him, ironically. He went to the Steelers. So.
Oh, is that the one guy that the Steelers signed this offseason?
Well, Juju.
Yeah, that's true.
I texted my cousin, though. I was like, good luck with Haig. He's awful. But those are the 2 guys they lost, Haig and Andrew Adams. And so now the 2 guys left are Fournette and Brown. But we just talked about how down those markets are. Those guys are going to come back at a cheap price. I believe it. And even if they don't, the Bucs are in a place in the draft where they're good on receiver anyways, but they can pick up a first-round running back that, in my opinion, I think any of the 3 running backs in the first round, Etienne at Clemson, who's a kid at UNC? There's a kid at UNC, for some reason.
Javonte Williams.
Stud. And then, obviously,
and Michael Carter, too, but he'll be drafted after Williams.
Yeah, he'll be after him. And then Najee Harris. Those 3, one of those, if not multiple of those guys, will be available at 32. In my opinion, right now, all 3 are upgrades over Fournette and Rojo and Vaughn and anybody else in the Bucs roster. So, in my opinion, like, the Bucs, if they do or don't get Fournette and AB back, they could potentially be in better shape. Like,
it was absolutely mind-blowing to see the Bucs literally retain basically everyone from that team. I mean, that's mission accomplished there for Jason Light. I mean, that's A+ offseason there, locking those guys up. Even if they somehow fumbled the draft, getting that team back with that veteran presence, the guys that led you to a Super Bowl this year, like I said, A+ there for sure in free agency.
Those voidable years, bro. It's witchcraft. Like, the team started using them.
But I do like the Chiefs. That was another one I was going to say. I think, obviously they're kind of retooling that offensive line, which they needed to. But you get guys like Joe Thuney, and then they signed Kyle Long. Yep. So they got those guard situations fortified. They got the rookie they drafted last year.
Thuney was the best lineman out there in free agency.
Yeah.
And Long was a wild card. I didn't expect him to come back.
If they draft a tackle, starting right tackle at 31, then they're good.
They could potentially be better off.
So they're good. They're good. And then I also liked the Chargers going out, giving some offensive line help for Justin Herbert, getting Corey Linsley. I think they signed another lineman too. I can't remember exactly, but I thought they did a good job of kind of attacking their strengths there, or their weaknesses there in the free agency.
I noticed you didn't say the Dolphins.
No, I mean,
can I be honest with you?
Listen, the Dolphins, they've tried the thing of go out and win free agency. Yeah. It's never worked. They signed a guy that fits exactly what they need to do. So from a wide receiver perspective, they got a great deal. They literally got I
won't hit on the Fuller deal. Can I be honest with you?
What?
My mind is hazy. Not just like right now. From when we thought Carson was going to Miami and when he re-signed in Seattle. There were some days that passed, and I remember us in our group text talking about how Chris Carson was coming to Miami. And then I remember I was like watching or reading something, and they were like, well, with Chris Carson re-signed a couple of days ago. And I was like, what did I miss?
It was just a rumor, apparently.
Did that happen on Friday when we were like drinking? Because
I didn't hear that he re-signed with Seattle, but I do remember reading after that was the Dolphins.
As of right now, that was like a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I missed that one, I guess. But that's how it goes, right? Once you get into tier 2 and tier 3.
You were supposed to help me.
Yeah, but once you get into
I confided in you.
Tier 2 and tier 3 of free agency, you don't really pay attention to that. It's kind of just like at that point, all the big names are gone. You're not really paying that much attention to it.
All right, more on Chris Carson coming up. They use the voided years to keep him, similar to what the Bucs have been doing. But Seattle has Chris Carson.
Ghost years.
Yeah, that news, I don't miss much. I missed that, but it's been fun, and it really, I'm telling you, that just flew under the radar. Episode 12 of the Craft Beer Playbook. Zach Blobner and Brian Ritchie. More lineage from our last names on the next episode as we move from 12 to 13. Just kidding. Our next episode will be on Tuesday. Next week, we'll have some more good stuff for you guys, some updates on our next live event. And we're going to branch out a little bit. And
we're doing Tuesday next week, so, right?
Yeah.
Switching from Thursday to Tuesday for next week only. Everything else will be back on Thursday, but next week on to early week episode.
Early week it is, man. We got some fun times ahead of us, as do you, our listeners and viewers, and excited to have you all on board. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Craft Beer Playbook, on Twitter at Beer Playbook, thecraftbeerplaybook.com, updated and all new and ready to roll. They have a whole listing of different beers and breweries in different areas. If you want to check it out, it'll break it down by location for you. I was going to cheers you, but now I'm just going to chug.
Last question. Favorite one from today?
Favorite beer from today?
Yeah.
I'm still loving the Bleach Blonde, bro. That's like my steady go-to.
I'm going with Florida Orange IPA. That was my go-to there. All right.
Cockburn.